I'm just going to go now into talking about developmental and emotional needs that we need to have fulfilled as we're growing up. This information that I'm going to share with you now is really interesting. It's been researched by what is called the Human Givens Institute in the UK. So you can Google Human Givens Institute if you choose and have a look afterwards for more information. The information that I'll be sharing with you today will be quite a lot to be getting on with to begin with anyway. So when we are, and this will be quite useful, I do recommend looking at the webcast. If you're on live now, obviously you will be looking at the slides, and if you're listening later, then I do recommend that you listen to this if you can. I mean, it's great to have it on your iPod and listen to it, but I do recommend looking through it or listening at least once with looking at the slides, because I've got some really detailed slides which will really help to make this information make sense. When we're born, we have some basic human needs that need to be met, which are things like air, water, food, sleep, shelter, clothes, warmth, and also stimulation of the senses, which is why we need to be touched and caressed and held. And the core human need for a human, emotional need, the core emotional need for a human being is to feel loved and accepted. The more one thinks about it and observes oneself, the more one can see that most, if not all, of our behaviors are about wanting to feel loved and accepted, right? And this is all. And the interesting thing about this is that this is not some fluffy, whimsical, optional thing. Optional. This is not optional, right? A human being needs to feel loved and accepted. And this is why the Human Givens Institute, they have called these human needs. And they've called them human givens because they should be a given, right? But so many of us have not received this as we've been growing up. And there are huge ramifications for this, in both physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. But usually the ramifications don't show up until maybe our teens or our 20s or our 30s or our 40s, because we're not aware of what's been absent as we were younger in our childhood, because whatever we got, that was the norm for us. We thought that was normal. I remember going round to a friend's house. I remember when I was, I would have been around maybe about 12 or 13 or something like that, and seeing how this mother and the daughter, my friend, were interacting. And I sort of looked at them and I was like, really? Is that how a mother-daughter relationship can be? Because that wasn't my experience, and that was the first time I actually questioned that maybe, things could be different. So a human being has a core emotional need. This is the core bottom line need. Yes, we need air and water and food and all that sort of stuff, but I'm talking about an emotional need here, to be loved and accepted, to feel loved and accepted. And then up to the age of 18 months, we have what are called developmental needs, which need to be met. And these core developmental needs are to feel unconditional acceptance and to be able to express oneself and to feel unconditional love. So as you think, I'm going to do an exercise in a minute anyway, so I won't go too much into it right now, but as you think of your life, as I'm going through this, just be relating this, I'm sure you already are, but be relating it back to you. How much was I unconditionally accepted? How much was I able to express myself? How much did I feel unconditionally loved? So other developmental needs, I haven't written them all down on this, are things like to be seen and unconditionally accepted for who you really are, to be heard, understood, and acknowledged, to be encouraged and allowed to communicate your feelings and needs in appropriate ways, to be taken seriously and have what is important to you acknowledged as such, to feel as though you're free to fully express yourself, to have your feelings and needs respected, to feel loved and cherished and that these are freely and unconditionally available to you, or that they were, 24 hours a day, to feel connected and able to reconnect easily and effortlessly if that connection was broken, to feel validated and know that there was an unlimited source of validation on hand, to feel approved of and to know that approval was unconditional and consistent. So these are developmental needs that need to be met by the age of 18 months. We need these things in order to feel safe and secure in the world. And remember, that there's that stress response thing that if we don't feel those things, even at that early age, this stress response is going to be coming online. And, to the extent that those needs are not met. And then from the age of 0 to 7, and these are ongoing as well, we have what are being called emotional needs, which are slightly different but similar. And these emotional needs are to feel safe and secure, to feel validated, to have a certain level of autonomy, to feel that one can be intimate with people, to feel a sense of community, to have privacy, to feel a sense of recognition from other people, to feel a sense of accomplishment in what one does in one's life, to feel a sense of purpose, to have variety, to feel that one is of service, and to have healthy self-esteem. So these emotional needs need to be met by the age of 7 because, you see, from the age of 0 to 7, we're purely an emotional being. You could say that in the womb we're an energetic being. We get born, we become an emotional being. So from 0 to 7, we're purely operating from our emotions. Can you imagine then what is set up at that age, depending on what happens to us and what our environment is like? And then from about 7, that's when we start going to school and we start training up our mental body, of course, with all the learning and studying and whatever, and we start to not pay so much attention. I mean, to our we're just not so much an emotional being. We're moving into our mental being, our mental body. But everything has been set up by now. Our programming and our conditioning and our emotional responses have all been set up. And, of course, at that age, it's all unconscious. It all goes into the unconscious. So what happens in life is we have events which create an emotional response, which then, out of that, I'm talking here at this early age, by the age of 7, which create beliefs about life, which then create us to have certain behaviors which will have results, because there's the law of cause and effect in life, always operating. There will always be results as a result of effects. So whatever our behavior is or whatever we do, actions have results and consequences. So I just want to show you how if these needs were not met when we were younger, if our emotional needs were not met, that means our developmental needs and our emotional needs, then we will create limiting beliefs which will be mostly unconscious until we become aware and we become conscious of them. And often they're called transparent beliefs because we see straight through them and we don't know they're there. And so we create limiting beliefs, and from that we have what we call disempowering behaviors. So we do things which don't really serve us, but we don't really know why we're doing this or that we're even doing it at all until we become aware, which is why, as I've said, the key to healing is awareness, becoming aware of what we were previously unaware of. So here we go. Here's an example. Here's an event which produces an emotion. A parent leaves home or dies, right? At a very early age for a young child, that's quite a significant event. Now, the emotional response would be maybe grief, hurt, anger, sadness, a whole heap of emotions. And if those emotions are not resolved and dealt with, which very often they're not at that age, unless we have a parent who really knows how to manage this sort of stuff, and even then, it still might be there in the cells, then that person unconsciously, that child, will create a limiting belief such as people abandon me, or I get abandoned, or I'm unlovable, or maybe more than one belief out of that, right? But the child is not doing this consciously. It just sort of happens, and they don't know that they've created that belief. But here's this belief operating, and then what happens is, in order not to feel the feeling that goes with the initial event, the initial loss, in other words, the sadness and the grief and the anger and whatever that the emotions were, if they were not processed, then we will create behaviors which allow us to avoid ever having to tap into that emotion. So, for example, I'll keep people at a distance. I won't let people get close to me, because if they do, they might leave me, and then I'd have to feel those feelings all over again, and I don't want to feel that. And I have to stress again that this is all unconscious until it becomes conscious. And so that is a behavior which is to avoid the emotion, but also it's a behavior that is how we do our life. And then, of course, actions have results, so that the result may be, well, I'm alone, or people leave me, or partners abandon me, or walk out on me, or whatever. So there we go. We recreate the original scenario. And the whole reason is because we just don't want to go near those emotions. So we have, again, as I said, we have emotions which create beliefs, which create behaviors, which create results. So now let's look at the positive version, if you like, of this, of how fulfilled emotional needs create life-affirming beliefs and empowering behaviors. And by the way, I just want to let you know that don't be thinking just, oh my goodness, I didn't have any of my needs met. Well, that's it. That's my life is, completely down the drain, and, might as well sign off now. No, that there's work that can be done on this to actually refill those emotional needs. There are solutions for this. So please don't worry that this is not the end of the world, if you like, if this has happened to you. So here's a positive, the positive version of this, if you like, is, say somebody feels nurtured and loved for who they are as a child. They will then create a liberating, empowering belief of, I'm lovable. People love me, and I'm lovable, and I'm worthy of love. So I'm worthy. I'm a worthy person. And out of that, they will create life-affirming, empowering behaviors, such as I look after myself, I put myself first, I make sure that my needs are met, I attract respectful people to me. Because this is the interesting thing, because everything is energetic. We are going to pull the people towards us unconsciously that are going to play out these scenarios until we can resolve whatever the situation is. If somebody grows up in a family where there's a lot of abuse, then they're very, very likely, probably 99.99% likely to attract to them abusive people, either a mentally or an emotionally or physically abusive person. And if they had physical abuse, then it's probably likely they'll attract somebody who is physically abusive, and it could be a partner, it could be, or most likely for that it's going to be a partner. But if they had an emotionally abusive parent, for example, then which is quite often harder to spot, then they'll probably attract somebody who doesn't treat them very well, mentally or emotionally, doesn't honor them, doesn't respect them, and they'll also attract to them bosses, people at work who don't either. And the only thing that's going to change that is us changing our behaviors. So anyway, back to this positive example. So this person creates positive, life-affirming behaviors, such as I look after myself, and as a result, they attract loving people into their life, and they have loving relationships and loving friendships. Now, that may sound simplistic, but I hope that gives the idea of the difference between if we have events which create negative emotional responses and our emotional needs are not met, then we're going to create these limiting, disempowering beliefs, and then out of that we go about our life in a limiting, disempowering way, with limiting, disempowering behaviors, and out of that we will get the consequential results, if you like. So it's really important to start addressing these unaddressed and unmet emotional needs.